A warm welcome to another Essential Quinn video today. Today my video is covering an update on the Russia-Ukraine war through a series of maps published in the FT, which are very professional indeed. Now I'm going to start the video with a clip from a mainstream media news report which gives you a flavour of the type of reporting we get on this war. Then we're going to look at the maps and we can compare and contrast how things are going for both sides. So here we go with that clip.
Russia faces many challenges in the war in Ukraine. Let's look at 7 of them, starting with this.
I believe that the counteroffensive is stirring fear among the Russian leadership and that and of course the soldiers on the front, given the lack of progress that Russia was not able to make in the past few months.
Ukraine's preparing for a spring offensive. That will test Russia, not least because it's expended huge resources with little reward.
Here we have a series of maps covering from March 22 through to roughly where we are today. So the message from our media is very much one of Russian fear and ineptitude. We can see here in the early phases of the war, the focus by the Russians was very much a pronged attack down towards Kiev, whilst their focus was very much more on the southern areas and the eastern areas of Ukraine. Now, in our media, this was presented as Russian failings, but I think if I show you another map, you will get perhaps a different picture. This is a map of the current picture on the ground as of the end of May 2023. The pink area are areas in the eastern and southern part of Ukraine occupied by the Russians. And you can see that there's approximately a line from this point in the north right to this point in the south, just below Kherson, of about 100 to 150 miles, where the Russian forces have clearly established their presence and defensive lines. Now we will look at this in a little bit more detail, but before doing that, let me play a clip from an American general on how he sees the Russians doing.
It's the total incoherence inside their command structure. The result of that, of course, is an incoherent approach to this war.
So the message there was the complete incoherence of the Russian command structure. But let's see how that incoherence is playing out on the ground. So we've heard for quite some time the Ukrainians were going to make a counteroffensive, a spring counteroffensive on the Russians. And in preparation for this, Russia has spent months significantly fortifying almost 1,000 kilometers of Ukrainian territory. So if we drill down now into the southern part of the area occupied by the Russians, we can see the Russians have built fortification lines, particularly this red line north of the Crimea Peninsula, to deal with any Ukrainian counteroffensives. And the Russians have created a multi-layered defense composed of anti-tank ditches, zigzag trenches, concrete dragon's teeth, barricades, steel hedgehog obstacles, and razor wire and minefields. This is an army which has gained territory and is very clearly planning to keep it. Zooming to the next image, we can see here right at the north of the Crimea Peninsula, there is a further defensive line that has been created. And this is very heavily fortified with a combination of trenches and tank traps. Now to the north of Crimea, the circled areas here are Russian fortified positions, and we see that around these major towns such as Bilmak and Polyhoy, there are very, very substantial fortified areas held by the Russians. And further north again, this time encompassing the area of Bakhmut, we can see that the Russians clearly hold Bakhmut and their lines extend further forward from that. So the commentary here says that the Russians have constructed layers of dragon teeth, trenches, and other obstacles across an extensive swathe of occupied territory. And after capturing them in May 2022, so a Ukrainian breakthrough here would face significant challenges. Now, I mentioned I would show you a detail of the Bakhmut battle. So here I'm going to play this series of 14 slides, and you can see how this incoherent and inept Russian army has managed to take this significant town, despite very, very strong opposition from the Ukrainians. In fact, it's thought that the Ukrainians have had as many as 50,000 casualties in this battle. So let's play this now. So what we saw there was classical military battlefield tactics. The town was encompassed from the north and the south, and it was gradually swallowed up. So back again to our main image of the area under Russian army control. As said earlier, they have a defensive line some 100 to 150 kilometers from the Russian border. This is essentially, to the Russians, their buffer line, a line which they will use to deter NATO aggression in the coming months and years. A line which moves the NATO forces away from their border, which they have always insisted was anathema to them. So based on this battle map, at this present time, I don't feel the Russians have any interest in moving beyond these lines. I feel they are digging in, trenching in, and waiting for any counteroffensives that might come either from the Ukrainians or the West. I think Russia is very much playing a wait and see here. We can see here that Russia has secured its buffer zone and it's building battle defenses to maintain that and keep it. And any breakthrough from either the Ukrainians or NATO forces could only be achieved at huge loss of life. The Russian military command, described by the West as being incoherent and inept, appear to have acquired a very, very significant area which they will be able to control through the use of defensive lines, and any attack on it or counter-offensive would bear the penalty of significant loss of lives. The Russians clearly are playing the game where amateurs talk tactics and professionals talk logistics. Their supply lines, their logistic lines, are no more than 100, maximum 150 kilometers from their own border. So this is a very clear sign that they will be very, very hard to dislodge, and they are clearly planning to keep this for the long term. I hope you've appreciated me bringing you these detailed battle maps of the current Ukraine-Russia war situation. They are very revealing. I think they show that Russia is in a very strong defensive position and can only be dislodged with very, very significant manpower pitted against them. Now, just to illustrate, in the First World War, the trench lines in France were some 500 kilometers from the French coast through to Switzerland. And in that war, Britain deployed 3.8 million men, the French 8.8 million men, the Germans had 11 million men. And I think we see from this 1,000 kilometer stretch in Ukraine, which the Russians have now fortified, just what an incredible, difficult war this is going to end up being. We can see that the warplanes are of little use because of the air defenses that both sides have. Helicopters are of limited use, apart from well back from the battlefront, again because of air defenses. So this is very much going to be a World War I battle of attrition, and we will have to see how this plays out, and I hope it will not escalate. Thankfully, our countries are not enlisting men to go to war, at least not at this stage. So let's hope that this war can be contained and further loss of lives can be avoided. Thank you for watching.